Have you ever noticed that now that you're grieving, you're starting to think about losses you haven't thought about in years? Maybe you didn't consider them losses. Maybe you considered them experiences in your life. Maybe you were bullied in the third grade. Maybe your teacher was really mean to you in the fifth grade. Maybe your mom left you at a friend's house for 2 or 3 weeks because she had to go into therapy and you didn't know what was going on. And you were just a young girl and you're still wondering about that experience. Everybody was whispering around you, no one was talking. Maybe you were abused, sexually abused as a young girl, and you hadn't thought about that for years. Maybe your grandma died when you were 9 and nobody talked about it. You were just expected to go back to school, go back to the fifth grade, and do all your homework. Maybe when you were 12 years old, your dog died, and you had that dog since you were 5 years old, and he slept in your bed every single night. And one day you came home from school, and Trigger was no longer there. But you're not given the space to grieve. You're not told that this is a grieving experience. You're told to keep a stiff upper lip and get ready. We got to get moving. I know you feel bad, but I'll get you a new dog on Saturday. And that loss was replaced. Have you ever noticed when you experience a new loss? So now you're in a new grieving experience. You've just lost someone extremely important to you. You're trying to navigate this grief, trying to figure this out. But all that keeps coming up for you is all the losses from the past. All the things that you haven't thought about in forever. Have you ever noticed when you experience a new loss like this one, old feelings seem to bubble to the surface? Things that you haven't thought about. One of the names that we have for all of these cumulative losses is cumulative loss. It's something that most of us go through. Most of us, when we come upon a grieving experience, when we lose our husband, when we lose our child, a lot of unresolved grief that has been sitting in our heart for decades now comes up to the surface. It floats up to the surface. And we weren't prepared for it. Not only has it floated up to the surface, it is fueling the emotional pain that you are currently experiencing. Cumulative loss happens when past grief adds up, making each new loss feel even harder to handle. It is not uncommon for me to get a griever who comes into my program because her father has passed away. And we start doing the work on her dad. And it turns out that she is newly divorced, the last 5 years, never talked about it, never did any work on the divorce. And we are in the class doing the work on her father, and all she keeps talking about is her ex-husband. A couple of reasons this happens. One, it's easier for me to concentrate on the ex-husband because I've had some time with that pain and it's not as painful. That's number one. Number two, it's easier for me to concentrate on something else other than this pain that is absolutely debilitating to me. This is really debilitating. I was there when he died. I didn't hold his hand. I didn't get to say goodbye. All of those things that have just happened to you, it's easier for me to concentrate on this thing, the old pain, the divorce, and not this one, the new pain, the dad, the best friend. The truth is, they're both grieving experiences. The truth is, they're both bringing up emotions in our heart. The truth is, they both really hurt. But the older one is a little bit easier for me to touch because I've been there longer. Any loss that we have triggers memories about the past, period. It always does. Good, bad, sweet, and sour, it always does. Think of a time and a place that you haven't visited in years. Suddenly, memories of time spent there come rushing back. That's because your brain is wired to link your memories to current places, feelings, smells, songs, people, locations, time. So any loss can be triggered by any of those. So we have the cumulative loss, and now we have the triggering loss. Any loss that we have, and we hear the song that he and I used to dance to in the kitchen, it's going to bring up that grief. In the same way, when you go through something stressful, like losing a loved one, it can stir up memories of past grief experience. So you remember the times because of the smells and the energy, right, that go along with it. It is in the exact same way that old losses will come to the surface when we have a new loss, because the body remembers, the heart remembers. It remembers what it feels like. It knows this pain of grief because it's felt it before. Even though it was in the third grade, it felt this brokenness in its heart. In the same way, when we go through something stressful, like losing a loved one, it can stir up memories of past grief. If you're feeling sad about losing a pet, it might remind you of losing a family member. You might lose your dog right now in your current age and state, but what floods forward is losing grandma when you were 9. Because the heart and the body remember, and the heart knows what this grief feels like. And this grief from the loss of your fur baby attached to this grief from the loss of grandma. And it all sounds familiar. It feels familiar. It seems very familiar. A lot of times what we'll do is we'll compare our new losses to our old losses. So we start looking at our new losses, and it's natural to do this, but I ask you, please don't do this. Try not to compare as much as possible, but it's going to happen, because there's many times I get grievers that tell me, this is the worst experience I've ever had. I've had other losses, but this is the worst. You can't compare them. Just know that they're there. It is natural to compare your current loss to the ones you've had before. You might remember how much support you received during a previous loss and wonder why things feel so different now. Where's everyone that was there when grandma died? When grandma died, I remember everybody coming to the house to see about my mom, take care of my mom. People were bringing food. Adults were giving me money. I remember what it was like when I was 9 years old. And here I am, and I have lost my husband, and I don't see that same response. On the other hand, you might feel certain coping skills from the past that you did. So you know when mom was grieving the loss of your grandma, she went in the room and she closed the door and she grieved quietly by herself. You were told to go sit on the chair and give mom some time. That's what you were told, and that's what you did. Give her some space, honey. Mom needs some space. So now you're doing your grieving the same way. You look at your children and you say, give me some time. And you go in the room and you grieve quietly alone. You're using the same coping skills that you did back then. It happened to me. When Austin died, I used the exact same coping skills I saw my parents use over and over again when we had losses in our family. Comparing isn't bad. You're going to do it naturally. It actually shows you how much grief you've had. But what I don't want you doing is comparing in your heart. This feels so much worse. You can also compare by looking in the past and seeing what you did on that grieving experience. That absolutely worked. It really worked when I sat on the front porch with my brother and sister and we talked about grandma. We talked about stories we remember. We imitated her. We told stories about her. I remember feeling so much relief after we had that talk. So something that like that you might remember from your past, that coping skill you might bring to your new. Remembering what worked might absolutely help. But a lot of times when we're in our new grieving experience, we don't even know what worked on the last one. We just know it all felt bad. Loss often makes us think about what could have been. When we experience loss, it's common to imagine how things might have been different. Would it have been different if I answered the phone? Would it have been different if I got to the hospital on time? What if I told him not to take the medication? Would that have been different? This is called counterfactual thinking. You might think, if my friend hadn't passed away, then I would have taken that job. If my grandmother hadn't died when I was 9 years old, my parents wouldn't have moved out of California, and I would still have my best friend. She would have been here to help me through this tough time. These thoughts are normal to think about what could have been. If Dad hadn't died, he would be here right now helping me with this loss. But it's hard. It can be hard thinking about what could have been, focusing on all the things that we don't have, focusing on all the things that can't be changed now. Our job is to focus on our grief, our broken heart, and the person that we've currently lost. That doesn't mean when you get into your grief healing program that you're not going to grieve the divorce. You may still need to grieve grandma. And that's okay. That's going to happen for you. We're going to work on that. But right now, your job is to concentrate on this current loss and this current brokenness. New losses remind us that we are capable of coping. That's the good news, friends. And I know it doesn't sound like it, but I'm here to tell you that that is absolutely the good news. Believe it or not, losses can remind us of how courageous we are. Think back to a time when you faced really hard losses. How did you cope? What support system comforted you? When you remember how you survived that loss, it is for you to give that hope a try again and know that you can get through this. Know that this will be the hardest thing that you ever do. But surviving is the goal, not thriving. So the next time your loss brings up any old pain, any old memories, any old losses, even if they go back to the 3rd grade, breathe them in. It is okay to feel these feelings. Use them as a reminder of how capable you are and how far you have come. Yeah, you have come really far. And old losses are going to be there until they have been completed. And for many of us, we don't complete them until this healing journey. We don't even work on them until we've had this loss. That's the other thing that sometimes is so amazing. Sorry, I'm moving my paper around. I'm trying to get to the grief questions. One of the things we're talking about, and the final notes I want to leave you with, is how loss can trigger memories from the past. It can cause us to compare our loss to old losses. It can make us think of things that would have been better. So a couple of the journal questions I have for you are, what is one memory that came to mind recently that you experienced with your new loss? That memory might also be with your person. We have a ton of memories that happen with our person. What's one of those memories that you're having? Have you ever compared your current grief to a past grieving experience? What did you learn from that past grieving experience that you want to bring into today's grieving experience? Do you find yourself wondering, what if? What if I would have answered the phone? What if I would have got to the hospital on time? What if grandma didn't die when I was 9 and mom and dad didn't move? What are some of those thoughts? What support did you find most comforting during your past grieving experiences? Can you use some of that same support now? Take a chance at looking at these journal questions. I put them there for you. It's great for us to go in and start tending to our own grief. It's a great opportunity to get into looking at our heart, looking at what's going on, looking at what we're feeling. For a lot of us, these journal questions are the first time we actually take a look inside. We're so broken, we're scared to open that door. But I encourage you to try a little bit. Friends, if you're not a member of the Facebook group, please do join the Facebook group. It is the Grief School. I show up in the Grief School every day on Facebook and I teach a lesson. And we are creating a community of grievers that are helping one another. We're becoming friends, and we're absolutely sharing our grief. And we'd be honored to have you. Thank you, friends, and I'll see you on the next podcast.